Hello everyone, welcome to Yellow Card TCG. My name is Zistral and I'm joined here today by a good friend of the channel's Clinton Chan, fellow member of Team Strictly Broken TCG.
Hello everybody.
So today we've got a very interesting type of content for you. It's what I call the Time Machine. In this series, we're going to be showing off old decks from Weiss's history, things that maybe don't get as much played anymore, or maybe decks before they were updated to become good. And Clinton here is one of the many players who have joined the game, not recently, but after these decks had their heydays. So he's going to be joining me on this commentated game as Tony and I play older decks, and he's going to be giving his impressions of, oh, here's how these decks are so different to what modern Weiss does, and maybe commenting about the sorts of play that we do. So here today, I'm playing Persona 4 Yukiko, 8 doors, versus Tony's Vividred Operation. So we're looking at like the 2013-2014 era. So let's jump straight into the game. Tony's going to Mulligan 5 because he's a very unfortunate opening hand. And it's worth noting that he's ditching one of each climax combo. And I should let you know straight away, Clinton, that he's playing a blank door. Like, he's not playing a combo for that door. And that was normal for the time. Like, climax combos were so weak that you would play doors just because it was the best climax trigger available.
Back in the day where red was definitively the best color just because of the door.
Exactly. Like, in this Yukiko deck, I'm playing 8 doors, one of which is a combo, but one of them is a level 2 combo that doesn't really do much, that I'm putting into the deck just because I'm already playing the door and it costs me nothing to do. Like, we're not playing finishes based on any strength. Like, Tony's finisher is an on attack, pay 3, ditch 2, burn 5, and that was still considered one of the better finishers of the game for that time.
Impressive.
So while we watch him make a level 0 board, I also want to point out that level 0s at the top back then, you didn't have as much utility. Like, Chiuri's weren't common, Riki effects weren't common. Like, having reliable plussing zeros was very rare. So most decks actually tended to play a bunch of like big power beats decks because getting over 3, 5, or 4k was kind of difficult. So having like a level 0 survive a turn was your source of plussing. Like, that was where people were like, okay, my level 0 survived an extra turn, I can generate an extra stock here.
Yeah, back then everything had those like stock condition plus power level 0s.
Exactly. So you see here that the Akane on Tony's board, while I have 3 or less stock, it gains 1000 power and a level. And then the Chies that I'm fielding have, when it attacks or when it is attacked, I can mill one, and if I mill a character, it gains 1000 power and a soul. So we're literally talking like 3, 5 levels here, and now I'm having to just trade in the middle if I can get 500 power onto the board, because I can't get over a 4k wall without like putting effort down. And like, this was the foundation of a lot of early Weiss, is that you didn't generate resources for free. Like, you had to really work for every single stock and every card in hand you got. So things like crashing lanes and trading bodies on the board actually impacted the game a lot, because you couldn't just like discard cards in hand and filter them into other stuff either.
It was actually trading off resources between both sides.
So based on what you've seen so far, based on what you've seen so far, this kind of feels like a normal-ish game of modern Weiss, right? Just with maybe a bit less utility, a bit less search.
Yeah, there's a lot less ability that just straight damages yourself for a replacement effect.
Yeah. Like, the closest I have are my Chies, which are on attack, and when they are attacked, mill 1. And that's like the closest source of deck speed you had at the time, because again, Chiuri effects didn't exist, on-play top 3s, Rize effects didn't exist. The fact that I have a tap self brainstorm was actually rare for the time. Like, most brainstorms of that era were A1, rest 2 characters. So, hitting brainstorms as well was like a rare source of advantage.
Yeah, I remember the first set I played in English was Madoka, and the Hammer was a tap 2 brainstormer.
Another interesting thing we're seeing here is that the level 1s that Tony is playing, again, are nothing like the level 1s you would see nowadays. The blue level 1 it basically is a 106k body. Like, it's just a big beat stick, that's all it does. And then the 105k has, when your other character is attacked, you can sack this to give 1/5 to the character being attacked. So it's an onboard counter. And that's a profile that does see play a little bit nowadays, but again, we're still looking at There's no utility here, there's no resource generation, it's just playing beat sticks, hoping they survive, and just trying to push damage onto your opponent. So I've hit level 1 here, which is very important because my deck actually has a level 1 combo. The Yukiko swimsuits, basically, when you play the climax, you get to put another copy of itself from the waiting room into field. And this is one of the few ways of actually generating resources, because you'd be making another attacker basically for free. And the thing about Vividred is that while it's a very good deck at making numbers and making this big board, it doesn't really do much to compress or generate stock or build up hand advantage in any way. It's just he's going to do his 1-0, bond to the 0-0, and then docking into memory to make the 2-1 with on reverse draw 1. But nothing beyond that. So I'm the one who's like trying to play the game, trying to push damage through. And that's not really the dynamic you have in modern Weiss, right? Modern Weiss, the dynamic is more like, oh, I need to do this, my opponent wants to do that, I'm going to do this so that he can't do that, while also letting me do whatever I want to do later on. Whereas you see here, this game's a lot more uninteractive.
I also think it's crazy that a 1-0 is bonding for a 0-0 and not the other way around.
Yeah, it does. Like, some of the Vividred designs were very, like, they were kind of new for the era, and they were like very good. Like, Vividred was an amazing deck for the time, and while the design wasn't like, by modern standards, wasn't that impressive, you could make a really big power lanes, and you had a surprising amount of consistency because your bond's like, okay, as long as I damage my pieces, I can discard them early on or clock them early on to find more important cards, and then still hit my engine later on in the game, which was something that we never had seen before then. Like, up until that point, most of your like climax combos were on attack, pay 1 deck search or something. So they were like sort of paying themselves off. Whereas Vividred was one of the few decks that you didn't need to combo to be able to generate resources because your bonding was generating resources. We see there that Tony had to clock 2 climaxes, so a bit unfortunate there, taking a lot of damage. But he's now level 2, so he could just actually hard play his Vivid Blues in this instance and really get a bunch of plussing off my board. But the issue is that because of back then, the game was just stick bodies onto the board and get damage onto the board. Even if he plays a climax, which he does have, he's not really putting as much damage through as I have at this point, or like, he hasn't cancelled as much as I have. So it's going to be a little bit harder for him to make up that loss in damage, especially because even though he's level 2, early plays didn't exist back then, right? Like, playing like a 2-1 8k was probably the best you had.
Or they were like heavily conditioned with those really awful early play conditions, like 5 or less cards left in deck.
Yeah, exactly. And a lot of the time, they weren't even early play heals as well. They would be like, gain a bunch of power, or draw 2, ditch 1, or something like that. Which is why decks didn't really tend towards playing those sorts of cards, because you'd be investing all these resources, the 2 stop, the 1 card from hand, to not really get anything out of it that impacted the board or the damage state in a way that mattered. Okay, so Tony's trying to set up a board. He's definitely going to try and docking. Like, what other impressions have you had so far of just like seeing these few turns of just us trying to rush damage through each other?
It's very impressive. It just feels like some random games I have these days where like, damn, every turn I just take a whole level for no reason.
Yeah, exactly.
I can't play around that.
Yeah, you just take a bunch of damage. But like, the difference here is that at least in modern games, you can try brainstorming, you can try playing your Chiuris. Like, you can take actions and like see what happens, whereas here it's literally just, I'm just gonna play cards and swing. So Vivid Blue comes down, 2-1, 7-5, gains 500 power for each of your other characters, and has on reverse clock 1, draw 1, both turns. Like, is that a card that you would think about playing in the modern day and age?
Oh, probably not. The funny thing, in this modern day, sometimes getting to level 2 early is funny just because I could theoretically stabilize. But, taking a point of damage, you're just drawing a card might not be, definitely not good enough in these days.
Yeah, back in the day, like, until Rewrite came out, this was the best level 2 play, like, we had. And, like, sure, the argument is that it can come out at level 1 because of the docking. But even then, like, paying 2 stock, because it's 2 stock to bond to dock. Like, so 2 stock to early play a 2-1, 10k on reverse clock draw is still pretty low value.
So did people ever like side that thing to prevent them from drawing cards on your turn?
Yeah, a lot of the times they did. Like, another thing to consider as well is that back then, climaxes with 2 soul and on play give a character 2000 power, 1 soul, and draw a card saw a lot of play because those were the only other options we really had back then. So being able to like side for 2 because you flipped like 2 souls off the top was a fairly regular occurrence.
Oh, okay.
And even if they didn't hit soul icons, in the case of Vividred, it was good because if they're siding your level 2, it means that they're not putting damage onto you, which is the scenario you want, right? So Tony falling behind on damage gives me a bit of flex room to like play my cards in the Yukiko deck. Normally Yukiko is very, very hard pressed for stock and hand size, because it's just constantly committing pieces to the board, turning them into bombs, and crashing for damage. So like this matchup is actually pretty unfavored for Tony, because I can very easily turn my back row into a bomb and just crash his 2-1, and then all those resources he's just spent are gone. But in this case, I'm banking on taking the level 3 as damage, and then being able to change into the level 3. So I'm giving up damage now to be able to force out more damage later on, which may or may not work in my favor. We'll see, but just at this point, you know, in modern Weiss, if you have a damage lead, that doesn't mean anything. Like, you know, you can die from like 2-2 or 2-3 sometimes against the right decks like Chainsaw Man. Whereas Weiss back then, if you have like, you know, a 3 or 4 point damage lead like I have here, you run with it because that's the best way. Like, if the more damage you can force while you're ahead, doesn't matter if you have no cards. If your opponent's on 3-3 or 3-4 and you're on 2-6, you can just guy climax, waste your hand, and then just, you know, survive that way, just win the game.
Yeah, these older day games seems like more of a war of attrition game.
Yeah, definitely. It was either that, or you pray for scenarios where like, oh, I just need to cancel a bit more than they do, and then if I do, I can set up my engine, and if not, I'll just crush my bodies and swing. So what I'm actually thinking about here is like one aspect of the game that modern Weiss does retain, which is like deck states and compression. So I've only got 1 card left in the deck, and I could crash my, you know, level 0 support into his 2-1 here and let him draw a card for damage. But I kind of wanted to get that last door to refresh into my deck. So I'm thinking like, is it worth side attacking? And I decide on no, because I don't have enough soul icons left in the deck. So I just give up the attack and pass there because I want to get that climax to refresh in so that I can maintain the good compression that I've built from the Chies. I think it's interesting how you can like still draw this parallels to modern Weiss, right? Where you like, okay, should I brainstorm here? Because, you know, should, like, do I twin drive? Do I like have, even though I have so many stronger effects, do I want to actually use them? Or do I want to just like, you know, rely on the core tenet of the game, which is just cancel more than your opponent?
Mm-hmm. Does it seem like this could have been a great opportunity to push more damage, since you don't have to worry as much about dying to this opposing deck's effect?
Exactly. Like, even though it would be refreshing 1 less climax, the argument is that he would then go to level 3, probably, assuming he didn't cancel, and he would then hit me with an on-attack burn 5. But even if I took that burn 5, I'm only on 2-1 post-refresh. I'm like, it's very unlikely that I will lose the game that turn. So I think you're right, I probably should have just attacked here and pushed the advantage like I was saying. I think this is one of those cases where having the a modern Weiss player's brain has definitely worked against me.
I think I also remember back then in these like grindy games where, you know, back then if your level 3s didn't heal, it was not good. And games actually dragged out several turns in level 3, which is unheard of in today's times.
Yep. And it's funny you mentioned like level 3 is not healing, because yeah, back then, like, you know, shortly after this era, Heal Loop Madoka was one of the best decks in the game because it could heal like more than 4 times in a game. And one weakness of the Yukiko deck is that while it's very good at pushing through damage, it has no healers in the deck at all. The only level 3 I play is an on-attack burn 1. So Tony's not pushing that hard here. Like, I'm going to take some damage, but not a lot of damage. And what it means is that even because I'm staying low on damage, I don't need to heal as much. But when I do hit level 3, I'm going to be much more heavily incentivized to end the game sooner because I don't have heals. And because I didn't force that damage through last turn, it's going to be a lot harder for me to do that. It's also interesting here that he's level 3 now. I'm a full level ahead. He's still thinking about clocking to draw because he just needs those resources because they're really hard to come by. And his deck does have healers unlike mine, so he could probably afford to risk it.
Mm-hmm. And he for sure has to keep generating stack because I think he only started this turn with only 3, which wasn't going to do much.
Yeah, and the ability to generate stock is actually more or less unheard of in this day and age. So like if you start your level 3 turn on like 2 or 3 stock, you know for a fact that you're not committing to your level 3 finisher. So this is where I take a gamble. At the beginning of my draw phase, I have the 2-1 that can change into the 3-2 from waiting room, and there's currently no 3-2 in the waiting room. But I remember stocking one, so I can pay it out and then change into it, which gets me quite a lot of presence on the board and a lot of damage onto the board. Because again, I can still climax combo the level 1, pull out each other, and then put a bunch of damage to try and force Tony to end the game. But as you can see, I've just burned a whole bunch of resources. Pay 3 Encore, pay 2 change. I'm going to pay 1 to bring back that 2-1 just to get it, just so I can try and change again next turn. Whereas he's built the stock, he's got memory compression. 2 memory isn't a lot in nowadays, but back then it was everything.
So, yeah, every bit counts.
Exactly. So like, I'm committing like a lot of resources now in the hopes to try and like to push Tony to game. But he knows that if he can get multiple turns at level 3, because I don't have a healer, he can eventually out damage me and then take the game from there. So,
oh, good cancel.
Yeah, definitely.
Oh, another good cancel.
And you see, yeah, he takes the clock 1 draw 1 because he knows that now that he's cancelled twice, he's got all the time in the world to try and build up and heal and play more cards. And I whiff my on attack burn 1 because that's one of the.
Oh, that's a whiff?
Yeah, so it looks for a specific trait, which everything in the deck is except your counters. So it's not perfect. And yeah, losing out the damage there is really tough because now he can heal twice, but then he doesn't burn, or he can heal once and get the burn on me, which, given that I'm on 2-4, I'm not expected to lose the game straight away. But this is Weiss Schwarz. You can never tell anything.
Yeah, especially since at max you can only heal twice and not 3 times, and just throws the math still in your favor.
Yeah. Again, like this is where decks playing towards their timescales for the era makes a lot more sense. Like, games back then, people did have multiple turns at level 3, so Tony's deck has more than 1 level 3 than his finisher. He's got like a healer, he's got a clock kick, he's got a bunch of different options other than just a burn 5, so that depending on how the game goes, he has ways of like doing other things, which is flexibility that I currently don't have. So yeah, the red level 3 on the board there is the burn 5, so I am slightly worried about it coming through. Because I had to open up an empty lane there, it gives a bit of extra damage as well. So we'll see if he goes after the burn 5 here. I get a lucky cancel, which might be what I need to survive, maybe.
Like he didn't play a climax.
So now that he's closing the gap, the clock 1, draw 1 is now a lot less alluring. Because he knows that if I hit level 3, I can just hard play my level 3s and just burn him anyway. But he's going to go for the burn 5, which I cancel.
Ooh, cancel on 1.
Yeah, cancel on 1 is not great, because it is still a 2-soul swing. Now, how can I maintain a board?
So did you decide to 3 Encore this Yukiko?
Can hand encore it.
Oh, it has hand encore? Nice.
It has hand encore. And I discard another copy of the 3-2, so in my draw step, I can change into another one. But
okay.
As you can see, like, it's pay 2, bounce to hand, change. So I'm overall, like, I'm the same resources if I just play 2 to on-play it anyway. The difference here is that I get to recycle the 2-1 to my hand, which is good for hand size, which is good for hand encore. But again, because I burned all my stock the turn before, I can't make triple Yukiko this turn, so my damage output is severely limited. So I'm going to add back the event instead of replaying a 2-1. The event lets me put a character who's waiting on the top of his deck and tell one of my characters to do a bomb. So by turning the other Yukiko into a bomb, I can get rid of his finisher so he can't burn 5 me again. And then hopefully here I can just shove enough damage through to get the game.
I'll say it's also fortunate that his back rows are tapped too, so it actually activates the second part of that event, right?
Yep. Which is the putting a card on top of the deck. So he gets a really good cancel here, but I am still in lethal range. But the burn one makes the damage not as good, or it makes the math a little bit weirder. But we'll see if I can get there. So it's 3 damage coming in.
So have you ever considered siding there because it's a level 2 and you were more than likely gonna burn one?
So it'd be 1 and 1 if I side for 1 there and I don't trigger, which means that this last attack on the 1 zone to his level 0 is still going to be an overswing no matter what. So at least here, this is a direct front for 2, which is lethal. Like, I think I can definitely see positions where siding might have been better, but in this scenario, even with a counter, his thing doesn't get bigger than my level 3, so I can still take it off the board and then force him to remake a new body to swing with. So he does get the final cancel, yeah, which is really lucky for him, and he has enough stock that he can play another healer, or if he lets this red 3-2 die, he can play a new red 3-2 from hand, heal 1 again, and still have exactly enough resources to burn 5 again. But I've still got a bunch of cards in deck, and as you can see, a lot of my climaxes are already out, and I triggered one as well. So the chance of me surviving this is actually quite low. I think I'm like 3 in 12 or 3 in 13 or something along those lines. So another option he has is to just pay 3 Encore the level 3 and just 2 soul me to death. So he's thinking like, do I Encore this? Do I try and draw the 4th copy, etc.? I think that's another thing as well, like, in the modern day and age, pay 3 Encore your guy is nearly always done just to get climaxes out of the deck or out of the stock, whereas back then, pay 3 Encore was legitimately one of the few ways you had of actually playing the game, which is insane to me.
Actually required to have that board presence.
There was an Angel Beats card that came out around this time, which was, when it comes into play, pay 2 salvage, and that was considered like godlike hand advantage at the time because it was actually hand advantage, and the fact that it costed 2 stock was irrelevant. It was like, oh, we get an immediate +1. This is great. And obviously nowadays we have like Rickies and all that sort of stuff, and the idea of like plussing has just gone out the window. But
is that the Otonashi from Angel Beats?
It was a slightly different card. Otonashi came a bit later on.
Oh,
okay. Yeah, the Otonashi was like pay 1, ditch 1, salvage, and gain power. Which again was also unprecedented because pay 1, ditch 1 salvages never gave you power until that point.
Yeah, I think that's standard now.
Exactly. So here he chooses not to go for a level 3 play, but instead he's just going to make a board. And again, I'm 3-1 with like only 2 or 3 climaxes in the deck. If he has a climax in his hand, he could have lethal. Here he plays 3 of the level 3 and not 4. So the line he was chasing is not there at all. It's one of those interesting like things where nowadays you burn all your resources at level 3, paying for your finishes and stuff. But back then, you had multiple turns at play level 3, but you didn't always need them because like you very rarely had enough stock to play more than 2 or 3 level 3s anyway, as we can see here. To the point where sometimes people would survive on like 3-4, 3-5 and just put down a bunch of zeros and just swing, and that was a level 3 game, which sometimes gets there. Whereas nowadays, if you're not playing level 3 finishes at level 3, something's very wrong.
Like you did a very poor job of sculpting the hand.
But yeah, the damage is coming through.
Just 3.
Again, we're just seeing like, if you have the pieces, you have the pieces. You know, if you force damage through, you force damage through. Like, it doesn't matter how much, what else you have.
No trigger.
He sides for 1, which is exactly it. So there you go.
Wow.
Yeah, 1 climax stuck in hand, 1 left in the deck, and then 1 in the climax zone. So that is the end of that game. So that has been Time Machine. I hope everyone watching has enjoyed that peek at Weiss Schwarz history. Thanks again to Clinton from Team Strictly Broken for joining me on this. So yeah, like, analyzing it, going back through that, like, what are your takeaways from that game?
I think, are we able to rewind back to when you were attacking with that second Yukiko level 3?
Yeah, let me do that. So it would have been around, yeah, here.
Okay, so your opponent will 3-4.
Yeah.
And this is for the attack from the first Yukiko, and then he cancels on 3.
Yeah.
Yeah, in this scenario, I think I would, surprisingly sided here to do the burn 1, do at least, 1 damage, and then frontal with that last card, because I think with the amount of cards your opponent left in their deck, they might not have been able to attack 3 times without having to play a healer, or they just died from refresh.
Yeah. I think that's fair. It's just a case of, to me, like, if this attack goes through, it's lethal. Like, obviously him taking the burn 1 makes it, like, skews the damage, and then but if I side here, I'm siding for 1, so he'd be left on 3-6, and then I'd still be overswinging with the last card, because it'd be swinging for 2 damage into 3-6. And at least fronting here, like I said, it takes his 2-1 body off the board, so he's then forced to commit to replace it, right? Was my thinking. Like, I can definitely see, like, siding here, and he would have cancelled regardless anyway, because he cancelled on 2. So he would have taken the 1, gone to 3-6, and then I would have he would have cancelled the last attack for 2 off on 1. So being on 3-6 means that he wouldn't have been able to refresh as reliably, but he would then still have at least 1 or 2 attacks to just bash me with and just try and get soul damage through that way. Because yeah, he's on, at the start of his turn, he starts the turn with 3 cards in the deck. And
yeah, if you would have sided, he would have had 4 cards, so he would have drawn until he had 3 cards left.
Yeah,
so in theory, he still only had 2 attacks to beat you if he didn't have another healer. So I guess at that point, I would have counted since he already had one of the healers in play, I would have counted the waiting room to see if he had any, what's the chance of him having the second
another healer
remaining left in hand.
Yeah, I think actually you're right. Like, I think looking on it a bit more, I definitely should have counted the number of cards in his deck and realized, okay, the chance of him canceling one of my attacks is actually pretty high, and because of that, I should just put him in a position where he has to heal or he dies. Yeah, so that's a good, good spot there. I think that's also part of, like, something that makes it interesting is that even though we're playing old Weiss with, like, much weaker cards and much weaker decks, you've still got these, like, moments where really looking ahead, like, makes a huge difference and, like, considering all the different angles. So it just goes to show that, like, even modern Weiss players, it's nothing about, like, thinking the way you're thinking about modern Weiss. It's the way about thinking of Weiss as a game that really just, like, shows that, back then, like, you had to consider this, this, and this, and then, you like, see lines that would have led to a different outcome.
Yeah, we really have to, know your game mechanics, and just, the core basics really helps you in, games in any era.
Yeah, exactly. Or, like, like we mentioned, like, earlier on, I should have seen that I was ahead on damage. He had no way of punishing me if I sent him to level 3. Instead of, like, siding or passing to get that last climax into the deck, I should have just attacked with that middle lane just to get the damage through. It's like, all these small elements would have made a huge difference. Alright, so that's going to be it for the first episode of the Time Machine in what's hopefully going to be an interesting series. Thanks again to Clinton for joining me for this, and yeah, anything else you want to say?
I don't know. Thank you for having me. It was fun, revisiting some older cards.
All right. So if you have a specific, era or time frame or decks you'd guys like to see, leave a comment down below. As always, follow us on the channel, like, subscribe, all the usual good YouTube algorithm stuff, and we'll see you all on the next video. Have a good one. Take care. Bye-bye.